just like long-term exposure. Hunting with my kid now is funny because one of the biggest things I'm trying to explain all the time, and my daughter will be, well, yesterday she turned old enough to hunt, but would be just trying to like suppress the excitement.
Yeah, stay calm.
Trying to suppress the excitement, to try to teach them just to be like calm all the time.
I remember when I was on that hunt with you, the first hunt, I was in the middle of like range. I had I was like lying down on the ground, and I had the deer in the sight, and I was thinking of squeezing the trigger, but I was realizing that I was letting my heart race too much, and that there was a little too much movement. And I remember I had to go, hold on, and I stopped myself, and I just calmed myself down for a second or two and settled down. But I recognized that I was in this sort of panic state. And I was like, don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't let that overwhelm you. And thank goodness I did. I probably would have fucking shot a mile over its head.
You know, a great thing you can't do this with archery, but a thing that I've done with my boy is I've done it in a couple circumstances. I make him dry fire on something.
Yeah, that's good.
Like one time he had a doe tag. We're trying to fill his whitetail doe tag, and whatever happened, I didn't like what I was seeing as he was getting ready to shoot. I'm like, no. And I wasn't worried about the opportunity passing. And I made him, he dry fired twice. And I'm like, now we're going to put around. Because I could just see that he was a little wound up.
Yeah.
And that was real helpful. But that's a good way to ruin your bow.
Well, yeah, that's not good with a bow. But if you think about like any other thing that you do that you get good at, you have time to do it. That's the thing with fighting too. When people have never fought before, the first fight that they ever have is fucking filled with anxiety.
Oh, I could be in a 10-minute fight and I probably wouldn't even ever register that it was happening.
You can't even believe it's really happening. But I mean, I'm talking about like a competition. So competition is even more crazy because you're ready for it. And then you're thinking it's going to come in an hour. Like, when am I up? I'm up in 2 hours. And then you're just laying around the dressing room and you have to stay loose. So you're hitting pads a little bit and you're warming up and you're stretching and you're getting ready. And then all of a sudden, are you ready? Are you ready? Fight. You're like, ah! But the guys who do it a lot, they get to this point where they can perform at an elite level, even in the most high pressure situation.
Yeah.
But that's accentuated by experience. The more experience you have, like a guy who has 50 fights has an enormous advantage over a guy who has 2 or 3 fights, because you've just been there so many times before and you could stay calm. You know that you can perform under those bright lights. For UFC fighters, it's a really big moment to make that debut. And a lot of them have had a bunch of professional fights before. We'll get guys that have had like 15, 20 fights outside of the organization. Then they get to the UFC, and then they can't believe it. They're in the fucking octagon, and they clamp that door shut, and then they look around, and then they see Herb Dean. Are you ready? Are you ready? And they're like, oh my God, is this really fucking happening? That, whenever there's a thing that you're preparing for so long, and then it's one moment. But with a fight, at least you can kind of move around and get loosened up. You can move around, you could avoid, you have skills. When you're drawing back on an animal, if you've never done that before, that moment is just like, it's just one moment.
Yep.
It's just one thing. You release one arrow, and it's so overwhelmingly anxiety-ridden for people.
I think that the real... when you spend time around really exceptional, really talented hunters, they're also able to operate. They're also able to do what they need to do in very like compressed time frames and do unexpected stuff. Do you know what I mean? Like they're like
they can make decisions.
Yeah, things fall outside of practice. But
yes.
Just like, and that's like I feel that for a large measure that's an experience thing as well.
I think so. I think that applies to almost everything. It certainly applies to stand-up. It applies to stand-up comedy. Like if something happens outside the norm. I remember when I was coming up in the early days, one time I was doing really well on stage and I knocked my drink over and I didn't address it, and then I bombed. Because like everyone could tell, I like freaked out that I knocked my drink over, but I didn't say anything about it.
Yeah.
And then I lost my composure, and then all of a sudden it was downhill. Like I had all this confidence. Everything was going well. People were laughing. It was going pretty good. But I had only been doing comedy like a year and a half or something like that. It was very sketchy, very touch and go.
I see that with when I'm watching a comedian and I see him deal with a heckler or an
Yeah.
unexpected thing, I'll sometimes think like, oh, they really are smart. Like that they were so like, because you watched it happen.
Yes.
You watch someone say something, you know it's not rehearsed, and they respond in a way that you're so jealous of that they would have ever thought to have said that. And you're like, oh shit, their mind is fast.
Well,
It's not just a routine.
Yes. They've also done it thousands of times.
Yeah.
The thing about stand-up is when you get in the groove, you're performing. Like for me, I'm performing multiple times every week. That's the only way you get in a groove. I was on a plane yesterday with Ron White, and we were talking about that. And he was talking about how long it took him to get back into his groove from COVID. You know, because COVID, he took like 8 months off, and then he started getting back into the groove when the show started opening up again. And he goes, you know, and Ron is such a fucking character. He goes, for a while, I was doing a Ron White impression on stage. I was like, what do I sound like? What do I do? He goes, I was surprised at how long it took me to get back into the fucking groove. You know, he had to just do a bunch of shows and then get loose.
Yeah.
And then we were talking about how some comics, something happens and they forget whatever it was that used to make them good. And then they can't do it anymore. Like they lose that fucking voodoo. They lose that connection that they have to what they do. It's and again, it's a lot of it is performance and it's anxiety. And there's a lot of things that are at play, you know, but I've done a lot of shit, man. And I think that hunting is probably one of the most anxiety-ridden things I've ever done. Like the where you just have to wrestle with your nervous system, where you have to like shut the fuck up and stay calm. You have to have that like dominant conscious mind that goes no, like a little weird thoughts will come into your head like nope, no room for you. No, stay in the groove. Stay in the groove. But if you don't have experience doing that, I can imagine for some people they're having a fucking heart attack. They're like hyperventilating. They can barely keep their arms straight.
Yeah. I've worried about as I've lost some of that, I've worried about what that means.
Well, it's just experience, I think.
Yeah, or I'm like, man, maybe I'm getting low T.
No, it's probably like the same thing that happens when you do stand up a lot.
I just don't like. I don't like all that. Just all the emotions, man. Like the dread and the, you know, the worried about dicking it up and I'll never. It's like so much more. It's just like I'm just so much more calm now. But you know what I want to